Like and subscribe! The other day I was on twitter.com and saw a post that I'd seen many times talking about Vanny and Michael, and how Vanny is a way better character than Michael, and people who like Michael over Vanny are dumb. And a lot of these posts really got me thinking, like, is Michael a good character? I assumed he would be, right? He's basically the main character. And so in this video, I'm going to go over why, and also why not, for if Michael is a good character, and then I'm going to weigh the pros and cons at the end and tell you what I think. But you can always form your own opinions based on the evidence I present, or based upon evidence you have. If you have your own, feel free to like, comment, subscribe it. You can definitely subscribe a suggestion, just leave a comment or whatever, and like and subscribe if you like the video. So first, I'd like to weigh a few cons that people have been saying that I think aren't actually the cons that we should be focusing on. Or at least I don't think the way we're focusing on them is the way we should be focusing on them if we're looking at them through a negative perspective. The most common criticism I see of Michael is that he's boring, or the only character he has is stuff the fanbase has built up for him. And though that's not necessarily wrong, I don't think it's a good point to make against Michael, because if you use that logic, you can't enjoy anything in this franchise. Because almost everything, aside from like the scares, is stuff the fanbase has built up. There's no line actually saying that the kids possess the animatronics. It's entirely possible that they aren't. And yet obviously that's what we've made the story to be, because there's hints towards it. And that's really how we should address everything in the franchise, because that's what the franchise is kind of about, at least from a lore or story perspective. Like, for example, William Afton. A lot of people really like William Afton, just kind of as an idea, but there's not really much that we actually know about him. He's a child murderer who had a friend who he made a business with. Heck, we don't even technically know if they're friends. We just know he made a business with Henry, and in the games that's as much as we know. And now that I've debunked a con, I'm going to debunk a pro about Michael. There are people who, in defense of the claims that Michael isn't a good character, have said that Michael is the best character in the franchise. In short, no he isn't. I mean, all things considered, the game version of Henry is the most concise character, who has Henry from the games has enough concrete motivations, but also some stuff you need to figure out. There's just enough stuff with him to make him one of the better characters. Michael doesn't have much of that. And I know this is kind of just me making the point from the first thing, but let me expand upon it to make it not just the first thing that I complained about. So, in FNAF, a series where you have to pick a lot of things apart to find out any of the story, characters and their arcs and parts of the story are a very complex thing. And I feel that Henry has enough of this, and he's probably one of the best characters, but that's probably because he was in the books. And every character in the books got a lot of development, or at least substance behind them. And of all the game characters up to a certain point, I would say Michael is the best character. Again, he is basically the main character of most of the franchise. Heck, depending on what you believe, he's part of FNAF 1, FNAF 2, FNAF 3, FNAF 4, FNAF 5, and FNAF 6. Although some of these aren't really belief-based and they're basically fact. Regardless, he has the most consistent arc in the games. As said, in the games, William is just a guy who kills kids, owns a restaurant. Baby is just a kind of possessed animatronic who is evil and really doesn't like being underground. Although, of course, I would say that, the hierarchy is probably Michael, Charlie, and Afton and Baby, kind of, depending on what you look at, have interchangeable development. I would say Baby has a bit more, though. But Afton doesn't really need as much development because he's, the main... He's just a villain, he can just be a villain. He doesn't need as much substance with him. But Michael shouldn't be the default favorite for everyone. I mean, Baby and Charlie have around the same development as him. And yes, people are naturally going to be more connected to Michael because you've played as Michael a lot. But there are other candidates that are worthy, and yes, Michael is my favorite of the game characters, and that's why I made this video, because I kind of want to defend him, but also I want to figure out, is Michael a good character? And now, I guess, to defend Michael, I will have to look at the pros and cons of Vanny, because Vanny is part of this, even though I don't really want her to be. So the cons of Vanny are that she's an underdeveloped mess of a character who had a lot going for her, but kind of fumbled the bag. And the pros about Vanny are none of that's really the character's fault, it's mostly the fact that she is severely underused, because of Steelwool, because they had to bring the Rabbit Man back. And heck, a bunch of other characters in Security Breach completely throw off the hierarchy that I previously established from the prior games. The best two characters out there right now are probably Glamrock Freddy and Gregory, although my personal favorite of the two is Glamrock Freddy. And I was really excited for Vanny, because I was excited for a new antagonist who still had a connection to the old one, but was mostly her own thing. And they just didn't follow through. And it sucks. And I feel that this issue stems from a very specific thing. And what is this thing, you may ask? I think this issue stems from the people who read the AR emails or didn't. Basically, think about it like a line. The people who are more knowledgeable, let's say, about the lore, more up to date, the people who know more about the AR emails are more likely to be in favor of Vanny being a good character, while the people who aren't. Let's think about it this way. Ignoring all of the AR stuff, Vanny has almost zero development. You play as her in the VR game, okay, cool, that's cool. Then, she kind of shows up a little bit in the very next game, but she's not very important. That's where the issue stems from. In those AR emails, it sets up a very interesting character for Vanny that not only did they not follow through with, they kind of retconned some of it. Originally, Vanny was supposed to have rainbow hair. Vanny does not have rainbow hair. And so, even some of the people who are more knowledgeable about the lore don't really like Vanny because there's not really anything. The reason people prefer Michael is because there's at least things you can infer. At least there's things you can infer. The things that you could infer about Vanny are completely out the window now. People don't even know if Vanny is Vanny or if Vanny is the Vanny that was on the top of the building. But back to Michael. Let me talk about the things that we do know and then the things that we've inferred about Michael to paint why people like him as a character. So here's what we do generally know. These are widely accepted facts. You play as Michael in the first FNAF game in Five Nights at Freddy's sister location. He then shows up as the older brother in FNAF 4, and you are more likely than not playing as him in FNAF 6. Those are the basics. Now, a lot of people will say you left a bunch of stuff out, but those technically fall under the interpretation category, which I'm about to say now, I guess. So Michael's story starts when he is a young boy and has a younger brother in FNAF 4. He eventually causes the death of this brother, and this makes him very upset, as killing your brother tends to do. By this point, his sister is presumably already dead, but eventually his father sends him some sort of message telling him where his secret sister secretly is. At the sister location. Well, it's not actually the sister location, but it's the game called Sister Location. Later on, in 1987, Michael works on Night 6 of FNAF 2, where you actually plays a different guard than the most of the game. Although he's obviously using an alias there because he also uses one in FNAF 1, where he also works. Although, of course, in 2003, and eventually works at FNAF 3's location, and then also FNAF 6's location when everything ends. And that's why people love Michael. You could also add a bunch of things, like the reason Michael is so eager to go underground and face these murder robots is because he killed his brother, and so he feels responsible to do something. At least he could save his sister. And maybe his dad never really loved him, as you could probably maybe infer due to the Immortal and the Restless, which plays in FNAF sister location. Which, speaking of, I would like to do my own interpretation over right now, because since we're doing interpretations, I'd like to give kind of my own on what Michael is in the series, and I feel like this kind of ties together to why everyone likes him. So obviously, people have always taken the Immortal and the Restless to represent William Afton not loving his first son, Michael, very much. Kind of inferring he's a bastard that William never really actually loved, with Vlad, the representation of Afton, as he wears purple and he's an undying vampire, saying things like, "The baby isn't mine," even though it obviously is. Hell, the baby even tries to eat the cat. But there, that's something people don't really talk about, no, is it? This is where my little theory thing starts. I personally think that, actually due to my investigations for this video, I came to the conclusion that I think Michael is a good mirror of his father. And what I think eating the cat represents is William Afton may have been born with some sort of homicidal nature, or at least some nature to do cruel things, and all his life he suppressed it until he was in a position of power, owning a children's restaurant, where a bunch of weak children he could easily kill resided. Maybe the reason he was so adamant about the baby not being his is because he saw maybe homicidal nature. Maybe Michael tried to kill birds or whatever, but there was something, maybe due to, but it may have been something to do with him not wanting the secret of his homicidal nature to leak out in any way. And so he doesn't really love his son, because the son represents everything he wants to hide from the world. This is also maybe supported by him being a bastard, because a child born out of wedlock is often something people are ashamed of or want to hide. So it would make sense for Michael being one representing that sort of thing you want to hide and keep away from the world. And so he never really showed Michael any affection, at least that we know of, although it's heavily inferred he wasn't the greatest father anyway. It didn't help William's worries that as he got older, his son started to look a lot more like him, to the point where people maybe started mistaking them for one another, as it is kind of inferred that he looks like a younger version of his father in sister location. Although of course there probably is some differences, but it's similar enough to where the point where people will mistake them every once in a while. And so by the time Michael has a younger brother, he bullies the child, even though he clearly loves his brother as seen in a FNAF 6 minigame. He bullies the child to tears because of his homicidal nature, something he can't really completely control. But after killing his brother, he starts to feel different. He clearly regrets this. I mean, he stands there shocked when Fredbear chomps down on the boy's head. And it even sets him on a lifelong journey to repair things that his father did. Not even he did, his father. And so though they are similar, the main difference between the two of them is that William wanted to hide his tendencies, but Michael didn't want them. Maybe his mother, while she was alive, or around at least, was very nice to him and nurtured him properly, causing him to not like evil, mean people like his father. And when he saw that he was going down a path of being a terrible person, at the worst possible moment, by the way, after killing his brother, not a great time to realize that, he decided to change. He decided to do a complete 180 flip. And the one thing that can truly stop the homicidal maniac that is William Afton is people not afraid to kill him. And so basically, Michael is a flip, a mirror of William, if William was a good person. And since they're so opposed just naturally in the plot, regardless of my theory, I think that's why people like Michael. Michael just thoroughly represents all the good in the series, despite the tragedies. Not because of them, but in spite of them. But those are just my thoughts. If you think something different, feel free to comment what you think, or if you do think Vanny is a better character based on the AR emails, or even something from Security Breach that I just didn't notice. But I, your host, have been Eris, and don't forget to like and subscribe!